There's a kind of wealth that doesn't arrive suddenly. It arrives announced, first as a whisper in your mind, then as a fire in your chest, and finally as a chain of signs so clear that once you see them, you can't unsee them. That's why this video isn't just about money. It's about direction. It's about confirmation. It's about realizing you're not late. You're in the construction phase. Napoleon Hill said every fortune begins with something invisible, yet decisive, a burning desire. Not a timid wish, not a maybe someday. A determination so real it changes how you think, how you move, how you choose, and even what pressure you can tackle without breaking. And when that desire ignites, life starts testing you, not to deny you, but to prove you. Maybe you've already felt it, a different kind of restlessness, a discomfort with just enough, a strange clarity that whispers, I can't keep living like this. And at the same time, a new courage rising where excuses used to live. You start noticing opportunities that once looked invisible. You start pulling away from small talk that drains your vision. You start wanting more, not out of vanity but out of calling. Listen carefully. Getting rich isn't an event. It's a mental process that leaves footprints. And in 2026, those footprints become even more visible, because when your mind shifts, your world starts responding in sequence. The 7 signs you're about to hear aren't superstitions. They're markers on the road. If you recognize several of them, you're not dreaming, you're advancing. And while these words settle into you, something wakes up, because wealth, before it becomes a number, becomes an identity. Once the identity turns, you don't return to the old version without feeling the cost. So breathe, because the first sign isn't external. It happens inside. And when it happens, Hill would say, the fortune has already begun. If this is touching something deep in you, comment, I recognize this truth. Before you can recognize the 7 signs, you need to see the invisible field where they're born, a mind in transition. Napoleon Hill was direct. The greatest enemy of fortune isn't the lack of money. It's the quiet presence of a mental habit, a poverty consciousness, an automatic setting that keeps you thinking small even when you pray big, dream big, and desire big. And how does that setting show up? It shows up as inner negotiation. You say you want to prosper, but inside you still try not to disturb the world. You say you want to grow, but you still feel guilty for wanting more. You say you want abundance, but deep down you fear being seen, judged, demanded from, held responsible. That tension creates a lukewarm life. Not total misery, but not wealth either. A comfortable, dangerous limbo. Hill explained that the mind works like a magnet. It attracts whatever matches your dominant belief. And here's the spiritual diagnosis most people avoid. Many don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because of unconscious loyalty to the old self. The old self that learned to survive, not to prosper. The old self that takes pride in enduring, but doesn't allow itself to expand. That's why the path to wealth begins with an internal shock. Your soul starts rejecting the old pact. Accept less to avoid disappointment. Stay smaller to avoid criticism. Delay decisions to avoid risk. And once that pact breaks, you enter the most important phase, the phase where the old mind resists, but the new mind insists. This is where many people quit, not because they're far from wealth, but because they're too close. And closeness can be terrifying, because it removes excuses. It demands identity. Notice this. When you truly start changing, your environment often reacts. People disappear, invitations change, criticism appears, temptations show up. That isn't bad luck. That's filtration. It's life asking, do you really want to rise, or do you just like the idea? And there's something almost biblical here. The desert isn't punishment, it's identity transition. You don't cross it to die there, you cross it to leave the old version behind. So if in 2026 you feel your mindset shifting, patterns collapsing, patience being forged, that may be your first major sign. Scarcity is losing authority over you. Now we're going concrete. And sign number 1 is exactly this. Mindset change, not as a speech, but as daily evidence. If this resonates, comment, I feel this truth. Now the turning point begins. Because according to Napoleon Hill, wealth isn't a reward for people who work hard. Wealth is a consequence for people who organize the mind around a target and turn that target into steady fire. Here's the secret most people never grasp. Burning desire isn't just wanting, it's applied spiritual direction. When desire is weak, any wind changes your course. A comment knocks you down, a delay makes you doubt, a mistake makes you retreat. But when desire becomes burning, your frequency changes. You start thinking like someone building a new life before the new life is finished. You start behaving like someone who isn't trying but deciding. And this is where the 7 signs of getting rich in 2026 show up, not as superstition, but as psychological and spiritual footprints of someone leaving the crowd and stepping onto the road of fortune. Sign 1. Your mindset changed and you can feel it in your body. You don't tolerate almost anymore, not from arrogance, more like a holy discomfort, a quiet urgency. You catch yourself choosing better, what you consume, who you're around, how you speak, where you place energy. People who later prosper often describe this exact moment. I stopped betraying myself. A common real example, you begin saying no without guilt, because you realize every wrong yes has a price. Sign 2. You're moving with consistency, even without applause. Hill said most people fail because they quit near the gold. The sign of wealth isn't high motivation, it's rhythm. 1 step per day, 1 delivery per week, 1 upgrade per month. And when nobody sees you, you continue. A real example, many who became wealthy had a ghost phase, working in silence while the world assumed they were doing nothing. Sign 3. You're connecting with the right people or distancing from the wrong ones. Hill's mastermind principle is real. Nobody builds a fortune alone. But before you enter the right room, you leave the wrong one. This can hurt. You realize certain conversations drain your faith, your focus, your vision. If you recognize these first 3, you're not imagining it, you're advancing. Comment, I'm seeing the signs, because what you name becomes stronger in your awareness. In the next part, we go deeper, signs 4 through 7, where value, resilience, confidence, and purpose become unmistakable markers of incoming wealth. Now we go deeper, because these next signs are where the shift becomes undeniable. Hill would say this is where fortune stops being a fantasy and starts leaving fingerprints on your choices. Sign 4. You're focused on creating value, not just chasing money. This is one of the most powerful signs because it changes the direction of your mind. When you start thinking, how do I solve a real problem? Money begins moving toward you. Wealth is a response to usefulness. Hill taught that fortune grows where contribution is consistent. A real example, people who become rich often get obsessed with improving something, an offer, a service, a product, an experience, until it becomes impossible to ignore. Sign 5. You no longer treat failure as a sentence, but as an adjustment. Your mind matures here. You mess up, but you don't collapse into shame. You fail, but you don't condemn yourself. You learn, and that is rare, because for most people, failure becomes identity. For you, it becomes information. A real example, one person says, I'm not built for this. Another says, I just learned what doesn't work. That single difference creates 2 completely different futures. Sign 6. Your confidence is growing quietly, but firmly. Not ego, alignment. You stop asking permission to exist. You hold decisions. Your communication becomes clearer. Your standards rise. Hill would say this is a sign the mind is stepping into command. A real example, people often increase income after they improve positioning, better boundaries, stronger pricing, clearer delivery, more certainty. Respect follows certainty. Sign 7. You're aligning money with purpose, and it becomes fuel. This is the most spiritual sign. When money stops being an escape and becomes a tool, when you understand why you want to prosper, mission, family, freedom, contribution, you become dangerous to scarcity. A real example, many people only get rich when they stop chasing money and start chasing the calling, and money follows as a consequence. Now here's the metaphysical truth. If you recognize several of these signs, Hill would say your mind has already entered the road of fortune. The outside may take weeks or months to catch up, but the internal key has turned, And once it turns inside, reality begins reorganizing outside. Because 2026 won't make you rich by luck. 2026 will make you rich by coherence, clarity, persistence, mastermind, value, confidence, purpose. If this is opening something in you, comment, "I'm understanding." Now that you can recognize the signs, here's the question that separates those who feel from those who build. What do you do with this tomorrow morning? Napoleon Hill didn't teach hope, he taught method. And method is what turns 2026 into a bridge, not a promise. So here is a practical ritual, simple, deep, and built on Hill's framework. Burning desire plus definite plan plus persistent action plus mastermind. It doesn't depend on luck. It depends on repetition, and repetition changes identity. The 7 signs ritual, 21 days. You'll do this for 21 days because the mind needs a cycle, not superstition, conditioning, focus training, the construction of your inevitable self. Step 1. Declare the burning desire. Write one clear sentence as if you're issuing an order to your mind. It must include 4 parts: how much you intend to earn per month, by when, month and year, doing what, your activity, for who, your customer, audience. Then read it out loud daily, morning or night, with firmness, not as begging, as direction. Hill warned, when desire is vague, the mind negotiates. When desire is clear, the mind obeys. Step 2. The definite plan in 3 actions. Every day write 3 actions that move your goal. 1 production action, create or deliver something. 1 sales connection action, reach out, offer, post, propose. 1 improvement action, learn, refine, train, adjust. Consistency beats intensity. Step 3. The value rule. Before choices, ask, does this generate value, or does it only give me relief? Many people call escape rest. Many call procrastination research. Wealth grows when you trade instant relief for daily growth. Step 4. Mastermind in motion. Hill called this a law, not a tip. Every day, make 1 strategic connection. Message someone you respect. Contribute intelligently in the right spaces. Ask feedback from someone ahead of you. Offer real help. Wealth moves through people. Step 5. The persistence altar. Night. Write, where did I stay consistent today? Where did I almost betray my goal? What adjustment do I make tomorrow? Finish with, I do not negotiate with my vision. If this ritual is waking something up, comment, I commit to the 21 days. Next part, the mastermind field, and how positioning turns signals into results. There's a moment when wealth stops being an idea and starts becoming a field. You may not see it fully in your bank account yet, but you can feel it in the air. Doors slightly open, invitations appearing, conversations getting serious, and a sense that the world is beginning to notice you. Napoleon Hill called this a living principle, the mastermind. Because for Hill, fortune doesn't come from individual force alone. It comes when your vision connects with other minds, and those minds create an intelligence larger than you alone. But here's the key. The mastermind isn't knowing people. It's building alliances based on value, intention, and direction. Think about what happens when you enter a room carrying a burning desire and a definite plan. You don't speak the same way. You don't talk to fill silence. You talk to open pathways. You start asking better questions. You start listening for what matters. You become memorable, not because you're loud, but because you're useful. And usefulness creates trust. And psychology confirms what Hill already understood. Your brain becomes a radar. When you define a target clearly, you activate selective attention. You start noticing opportunities that were always there, but your mind previously filtered out. It's not that the world changed. It's that you gained a new lens. And that lens leads you to the right people, the right environments, and the right information. Now here's the spiritual layer. When you decide to create real value, you become an answer. And those who become answers don't stay empty for long. The harvest follows the seed. You plant solutions, you reap return. You plant consistency, you reap respect. You plant courage, you reap expansion. So manifestation expands through 3 very practical moves. You deliver before you demand. You offer something useful, an idea, a fix, a recommendation, a real assist. This creates presence. This builds reputation. And reputation is invisible currency that often arrives before money. You enter the root of the right conversations, not everywhere where your goal circulates. Hill would say, get close to people who already think at the size of your destiny. A group, a community, a mentor, a partner. Wealth often travels through one sentence said at the right moment, but you have to be in the environment where that sentence exists. You turn persistence into your signature. Most people show up once. You show up consistently. And consistency creates trust. Trust creates referrals. Referrals create flow. And what once felt hard starts feeling natural. Here's the truth for 2026. Money isn't only the result of effort. It's the result of positioning yourself in the flow of value. When you align, you don't chase. You build a trail and return finds you. If this is clicking, comment, I'm entering the right rooms. Next part, the internal upgrade that makes the money stay. Confidence, identity, and the version of you that can sustain wealth. There comes a point where your greatest miracle isn't the money arriving. It's you no longer being the version of yourself that couldn't sustain that money. Napoleon Hill treated this as foundation. Nobody maintains a fortune with a mind that was trained only to survive. Real wealth requires a new self, one that thinks with firmness, decides with clarity, and acts with consistency even when emotions fluctuate. And here's a sign that almost always appears before the leap. Confidence starts growing from the inside, quietly, without needing to prove anything to anyone. You still feel fear sometimes, but it no longer governs you. You still feel doubt, but it no longer paralyzes you, because confidence isn't the absence of insecurity, it's the repetition of small acts of courage. Hill called this autosuggestion. What you repeat becomes a command. Command becomes behavior. Behavior becomes destiny. That's why when identity changes, you notice concrete details. You begin speaking differently, not with arrogance, with position. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for wanting to grow. You start choosing with more respect for your time, and the world feels that as leadership energy. And the strongest shift of all, you start making new agreements with yourself. Before you said, I'll try. Now you say, I will do it. Before you waited for mood. Now you build discipline. Before you depended on motivation. Now you depend on commitment. This is the point where wealth stops being a goal and becomes a consequence of your inner pattern. And there's a spiritual proof of this new identity. You can stay in the process without needing constant external signs. You work while nobody applauds. You plant while nothing seems to grow. You improve while nobody recognizes it. That's maturity. Most people quit not because they lack talent, but because they are addicted to quick rewards. Here's a gentle biblical image that fits this perfectly. There are seasons where you're sowing in the dark. Nobody sees roots growing, but they grow. And once roots are strong, fruit arrives without asking permission. Heaven isn't impressed by hurry. It responds to consistency. So consolidate this identity with 3 keys Hill would respect. Daily decision. Every day, one decision that moves you toward your wealth self, even if it's small. Value posture. You don't chase approval. You become someone who delivers results. Loyalty to burning desire. You don't betray the calling just because the path got uncomfortable. When this locks in, you realize confidence isn't a feeling. It's a structure. And that structure begins attracting bigger opportunities, bigger pricing, and bigger responsibility. Because 2026 won't only test your faith, it will test your identity. If this touched you, comment, I align with this energy. Final part next, purpose, integration, and the closing decree that seals the whole path. Now we reach the highest and rarest point in Napoleon Hill's philosophy. Money is not the center. Money is the consequence. The strongest kind of wealth is built when you're not trying to get rich to prove something, but when you know exactly why you want to prosper and what you're meant to build with that power, because there is money that arrives and disappears, and there is money that arrives and stays. The difference is simple. Inner structure plus outer purpose. Purpose becomes your anchor. Purpose is what makes you endure the process, hold your standards, and keep moving when results are still quiet. Hill called it a definite major purpose. He understood a deep truth. The mind needs a target that makes sense. When it doesn't, the brain hunts quick pleasure, distraction, shortcuts, escape. But when it does, you become someone who can carry pressure and continue anyway. And here's the spiritual sign that announces wealth. You begin to feel your prosperity is part of something bigger than you. Not just consumption, not status, freedom, legacy, protection, construction, contribution. You begin to see money in the right hands as a tool that heals. Healing old debt cycles, healing constant fear, healing dependence, healing the anxiety of, what if I run out? And suddenly, wealth stops being distant and becomes responsibility, almost sacred. This is integration, spiritual and material. You don't have to choose between faith and strategy. You don't have to choose between prayer and action. Hill would say your mind is the altar where you decide, and the world is where you execute. And when purpose becomes clear, 3 changes happen. You stop chasing money and start building value with direction. You start saying no to what pulls you off mission, because wealth isn't only lost by crisis, it's lost by distraction. You feel peace before the final results, not passive peace, but aligned peace. I am on the path. So ask yourself tonight with seriousness, if I become wealthy in 2026, who do I become? What do I build? Who do I free? What do I refuse to tolerate? That question organizes your mind, and an organized mind is a dangerous magnet. Now let's seal you, not to hype you, to lock your identity. Final decree. I have decided 2026 will confirm what I have already determined within. My mind is renewed, my desire is burning, my plan is defined, and my action is consistent. I attract the right people. I create real value. I learn from challenges and I remain steady. I am aligned with my purpose and wealth finds me on the road. I prosper with consciousness, honor, and direction. If this decree shook something awake in you, comment, I decided. 2026 is my year of building. And to seal it fully, subscribe to Wealth Rewired, like the video, and turn on notifications, because your mind needs to hear this more than once until it becomes identity, until it becomes destiny.